Self-love. If we consider what self-love is, we see that it contracts everything. However, it is impossible to get rid of it, but it can be mixed with something else. No one can possibly act beyond some degree of self-love, beyond self-interest, self-feeling, self-esteem, self-admiration, self-delight, self-praise, self-seeking, and so on. It is useless to talk of this unless a person has begun to notice self-love at work within them, and to feel its taste. So many things we attribute to disinterest, so many illusions we possess make us feel we are only considering the other person's welfare. So easily do we fall into the self-image that we are somehow sacrificing ourselves, particularly if the other person does not heed our counsel. It is difficult to catch even a glimpse of the forest of self-love and all of its pseudo-creations. However, if one does, it is a startling experience and a real shock, akin to the realization of mechanicalness. It creates a sense of being undermined, an empty feeling that apparently nothing can fill in the moment. When you feel you have been betrayed by a friend, then you feel undermined. However, to feel that you have been betrayed by yourself is even worse. Self-love shuts out certain things and opens the door to others. It includes the circle of our ordinary life, of people who on the whole do not disagree with or criticize us, family, pride in our home, children and friends, daily personal interests, business interests, our possessions, and so on. We are told in this work that there is a development of our emotional center that becomes possible, that is called emotional center awakening, which is the first step toward expanding our consciousness. This development is one that goes beyond self-love, and has to do with a feeling of our nothingness. Try asking yourself this question. What different kinds of love have you observed in yourself? Are they all the same? You love food, for example, you enjoy comfort, possessions, your transportation, children, freedom, and you love being praised. You love money, you love power, you love going to the movies, eating out and being served. You love dress, you love substance misuse, you love hearing scandal. You love getting the better of someone else, you love scheming, you love your dog, you love being a success, you love chocolate, you love, well, what else? These loves, however moderate, are shades of self-love. They all lead to oneself, as the spokes of a wheel to its hub. It can be startling when we realize that it is always that thing called oneself that is being comforted, exalted, titivated, soothed, flattered, and satisfied. That when it is not, it begins to whimper like a baby and pout. It is always this odd restless thing that is being offended, upset, negative, indignant, unappreciated, and downcast. Cast down from what though? From its center stage of self-love. How often have we come close to hating this, oneself, all its tiresome intrigues and insincerities, lying complications, crude ambitions and rivalries, account-making, and all the ways in which it ruins everything, turning all good situations into dust. We can hate its falsities, but what do we find? We find that it seems impossible to get rid of it, we seem fastened to it securely, and react to its influences continually. It has so many tricks, so many pretenses and deceptions that we simply cannot deal with it. We are mostly too late. New emotions, however, can catch it in time, but they have to be fresh and as yet unexplored. Remember that the speed of emotions is greater than that of thoughts. So in short, we cannot deal with it without the help of something else. We cannot move out from under the influence of one thing without falling under the influence of another. Let's look for advice at some things mentioned in the scriptures. A great deal is said about hating, so let's begin with what is said in one place about living in malice and envy, hateful, about hating one another. See Titus, chapter 3, verse 3. For we ourselves also were sometimes foolish, disobedient, deceived, serving diverse lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy, hateful and hating one another. This is the usual state of self-love. It is inevitable, for at its core self-love is against everything that does not feed it. A person may include others within the area of that self-love, so that it looks like the disinterested love of others. But it is not so. Or a person may delude themselves in 1,000 ways, for self-love is very clever and hides its true form. The point being that self-love can only feel against others, fundamentally because it cannot love anything beyond itself. It is pointing in one way only, to itself. Whatever devious paths it traces lead to the same center stage. It is self-love, it is self-liking, it is self-interest, it is quite simply self-everything. It sits down at its focal point and gathers everything around it, then whispers, "My precious." Have you ever noticed it doing this? When you do, then you might begin to feel a growing sense of self-loathing. Some passages in Scripture actually refer to hating oneself. This is going against self-love. Sometimes people say they hate themselves, however that is often a pretense, a subtle picture or self-image that is imagined and assumed to be real. Imagination, though, is never real, and false personality, based on self-love, is composed of just that powerful substance called imagination. We are told somewhere in Scripture that unless someone hates themselves they cannot understand the teaching of Christ. We are also told, in a somewhat strange reference, that we must hate father and brethren. Where Christ says, "If any man cometh unto me, and hateth not his own father, and mother, and wife, and children, and brethren, and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple." In Greek, the word translated as one's own life means soul or psyche. For example, the phrase, "to lay down one's life for one's friends," should be translated as, "to go against one's own soul for the sake of their friends." We can understand that going against one's soul is equivalent to going against our self-interest, and that to hate one's life is to hate the oneself that is formed and controlled through self-love. We can conceive the soul at this level as a point of intense self-love, through which we are made to identify most powerfully. When it is interfered with, we turn to hate. It is curious to note that hate is the opposite to self-love, and that most do not understand love as a positive emotion, as one to which there is no opposite and so no inner contradictions. It would be another matter, of course, if the opposite to self-love were self-hate. Again, we might conceive that the opposite to love is self-loathing. However, true love, as noted, as a positive emotion has no opposite and attracts nothing contrary to itself. Having everything within as one. It is a union of opposites, a third force that we do not know because we swing from one side to the other on a pendulum. When, through practice of uncritical self-observation, over long periods of time, photographs begin to be captured of typical aspects of oneself, and they come together suddenly, like an image being developed, forming through separate observations running together, connecting and forming one collage. Then, and only then, can a sense of uneasiness or dislike of oneself can truly begin. There is danger here, though, unless the work is being followed. It is a mistake to think there are no instructions in this work, or that they have no significance. We learn otherwise and learn through experience how and why we need to follow instruction, to reason things out for ourselves. If this distaste with oneself is genuine and not another whim, becoming negative through self-pity, then in that case it becomes dangerous, and has slipped into the wrong place, getting mixed up. If we still take ourselves as one, then it is dangerous. We have to realize that we are not a monism. It is essential for the eventual action of this work, and so needs to be realized often. Otherwise we stand in the way of everything. We stand in the way of our own development. This work cannot act upon us if that is the case. It cannot alter or take anything away from our room, so to speak, because we exclaim, "Hey, that's mine." You cannot get to certain emotions that come beyond the zone of self-love if you take yourself as a unity. One of the first of the many subtle strikes against self-love that this work gives is the idea that we are not one but many. In fact, there is no real I. This is unflattering to self-love. Of course, the further realization that we are mechanical is another such blow against self-love, and so can scarcely be agreed to by anyone. To claim they are all asleep and not yet conscious is intolerable to self-love. You can be sure it will defend itself and tell you the whole subject is utter nonsense. Like Pharaoh, continue its rule and not let you go free. Something else in us, apart from self-love, has to see the truth of such ideas. If there were no emotions possible beyond those belonging to self-love, then this would not be possible, and so no development would take place in our emotional intelligence. It is upon the appearance of these other, and new unexplored emotions, their gradual strengthening, that development depends, and this is when our being changes.